it was just a heyday, you know? I mean, a load of hash would come in once in a while.
Hi, everybody. Todd Denkin here with Becoming the King of Pot. Welcome back to our latest episode. With me, of course, is my ex-criminal cousin, Bruce Perlowin. Bruce, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Todd, and I'm very excited today because we're going to have a lady that I've worked with her and or her family for about 50 years when we first started.
Has it been 50 years?
Yep,
Wow.
1975, 76. No.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're going to meet Judy in just a second, but before we do, if you are watching us for the first time or the 100th time, thank you for that. But please like and subscribe and tell your friends to do the same. It really helps our plan here at Becoming the King of Pot. So, Bruce, why don't you do the introduction to Judy McNelis, the Golden Dragon Lady? Welcome to the broadcast. And Bruce, why don't you tell us who she is?
Okay, well, to start off with, I'm going to show you a book that her son, David Michael, wrote about her. And it's called My Most Wanted Marijuana Mom, because she escaped from prison for being for marijuana smuggling and was on the FBI's top 15 most wanted list. And I worked with Judy's sister Nancy back in the late 70s, and Mike and Louie, who were the partners. And Judy was like the bigwig. She was bringing loads in from Mexico and from Jamaica. So I never met her then. I just worked with Nancy and Mike and Louie, and we did a lot of and Jeannie. Jeannie was one of somewhere in there, either Nancy's partner or Judy's partner. And the next time so we did a lot of stuff together, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds from Jamaica, from Colombia, from Mexico. And when I first met her personally was at FCI Pleasanton in prison. I was in prison for marijuana smuggling, and she was in prison for marijuana smuggling. And she, in fact, was the roommate of the lady, the Russian spy, Svetlana Ogorodnikova, who I eventually married in prison. We were in co-ed prisons, men and women together. So
in Pleasanton.
Yeah, that's crazy too.
So that's where I actually met her personally, although, of course, I knew of her my entire adult smuggling life.
So, Judy, welcome to the broadcast, and we appreciate you joining us today. And
thank you, Todd.
Tell us, how did you get the nickname, the Golden Dragon Lady?
I believe that was a sort of a made-up name that they gave me because I used to wear this one jacket that had some sequins on it, and it was golden looking, you know. And somebody just said, "You look like the Golden Dragon Lady," and it sort of stuck.
Nice. So that's quite a distinction to be on the FBI's most wanted list. So congratulations for achieving that goal, of course.
I
But
think
let's
that
go
was
back.
because I escaped, from jail.
Ah,
I saw it
well,
through
I
a
definitely want to
bar.
hear that story. Yeah, I definitely want to hear that story. But before we do, let's talk about the very beginning and how you got involved in cannabis and cannabis smuggling.
I think I got involved when I was living in Parker, Arizona. My husband was a bank manager there, and I had a fabric shop and sewing. And this guy came in and was flirting with me, always brought a bottle of wine, And I had smoked once before with my sister, Vicky, but just a little bit. I'd never smoked really much at all. And he got me to go up to his apartment right off, I'm trying to think, sort of a road out of Parker. He had a nice trailer, and he had some kind of a spiral staircase that went up. Really looked unimposing, but when you got inside, it was beautiful. He had tricked out everything. And he turned on some good music, and he said, "Do you want to smoke something?" And I made him promise not to make a pass at me if I smoked. And so he gave me some really good herb, and I smoked and got high. and listen to some good music. And I remember going back to the house and was thinking, that I had found something that was going to help me physically because it relieved my migraine immediately, which is what it does. It relieves pain and stress. And it started started that way. And I remember there wasn't any place I could get herb, and I've forgotten what I got the first time. I think I got it from my sister, one of my sisters. I had 5 sisters, and I remember I would only smoke a little bit of the shake from the bottom. I didn't realize that all the trichomes were going to the bottom, and I was smoking a lot of trichomes. I was getting really good herb and got high, and that's how it started. And there was no
Nice.
place
So
you could
you
go
were
and
one of the
get it.
original right, so you were one of the original medical marijuana patients.
Yeah, definitely, and still am,
Nice.
because I think that it is medicine for modern day man, Bruce. You only added ancient medicine, but I was the one that coined it medicine for modern day man, and you said ancient medicine for modern day man. Ah, and so I started smoking, and I remember that I'd kept it, whatever I got, I can't remember, I think I went down to Phoenix, and I remember somebody giving me some, and it was like a pound, and I was afraid to smoke the actual buds. I just smoked the stuff on the bottom thinking it was not as strong, and in fact, it was probably stronger because the trichomes had all dripped down to the bottom, and
Right.
so I started smoking, and it was medicine for modern day man. Ancient medicine, Bruce. Like you said, ancient medicine for modern day man, and still is.
Yeah, I would agree that, all cannabis is medical cannabis.
Yes, it
I hate
is.
that there's a distinction between, recreational and medical. It's all medical. Even if you're smoking it just to get high,
Exactly, it is
it's
because
all
it
medical.
it does. It changes, uh, your perception. It brings you into the now is what it does,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, so walk us through the process of, okay, you have a sewing shop, right? You're smoking weed to get rid of your migraines,
Actually,
and, how do you
I
make your
didn't
first sale?
I think probably I went over to Jamaica with my pilot, Frank Corey, who
Wait, how
was,
do you get a pilot? You just have a pilot?
he was a pilot. Actually, I learned to fly. I was flying before then. When I was in, Parker, Arizona, my husband was the bank manager there of the bank, and he had a guy that had to fly up and down out of Phoenix, come up and pick up the paperwork on the bank and fly it down every day, and, I said, "Well, while you're here," I said, "Can you teach me how to fly?" And he said, "Sure." And I remember soloing in Parker, Arizona. So I learned to fly in Parker and soloed and, uh, and smoked marijuana, little teeny amounts, very small amounts, very undercover. Nobody knew I smoked, the whole bit. And,
And what year is this?
uh, probably late 70s, maybe 78, 77, possibly at the very earliest, maybe.
Mhm.
And, but very small amounts, just to keep my migraine from killing me. And also hiding it, and,
Didn't you
I
decide to grow some marijuana in 1 year in Arizona?
I tried always to try to grow, and I remember, the first time I went to Jamaica and went to the fields, and I'm trying to think of Savilamar. That's where they grew, uh, Cincy, the female. They couldn't be around, so they had it real high up. It was a mile up. We walked a mile up this mountain, which was about a 45-degree angle. Couldn't hardly make it. Everybody got out of breath by the time we got up to the fields. And I remember this man his name was Man on a Donkey. He rode a donkey, and he was there, and we were walking up at about, this kind of an angle, over a mile up in Jamaica, and winded, completely exhausted by the time you got there. And then all of a sudden you come out, and this huge little valley are these giant, beautiful marijuana plants, and they are literally dancing. Have you ever seen a marijuana plant dance? They
I
dance.
have.
They have energy. And then
Well, I have a
went from
question,
there.
Judy. How was it you were in Jamaica looking for marijuana? How did that come about? I mean, just say, I'm going to go on vacation and go find marijuana, or
No, Frank Corey, my pilot, who's dead now, really very beautiful man. He was a friend of one of my sisters. I come from a family of 6 girls, and he was a blues friend, and he was a pilot, and he flew me over. And then we decided to go ahead and import, because you couldn't find marijuana, unless you were growing, and I didn't grow at that point. So we started smuggling. And
Right, so it was really just a means to an end, just a means to get yourself some pot so you
no,
could
we
smoke?
we never brought just a little bit. We always brought whatever the plane could hold. And at first, I
And
think
what was that decision? Yeah, talk about that decision you made to, "I'm gonna smuggle marijuana."
well, I couldn't go to Jamaica and live at that point because I had children. I had a shop, a fabric shop and sewing, and I was married. So, I couldn't go over there, and there was no place that you couldn't call up like we call up now, and they come to the door and deliver it to you. Uh,
Right, but you're just smoking a little bit of marijuana. How's that decision made of, "I'm gonna fly to Jamaica and go bring a bunch of marijuana back and start selling it"?
oh,
I
and we
mean,
brought a
how do you come
lot
to that
back.
conclusion?
We brought a lot back. I'm trying to think of the first time. The first time that I was in Jamaica, I remember walking behind this big black man, and he had a machete. Huge, long, big machete, and he was a big, huge black man, and I was walking on this real narrow little pathway going up to the field and the airfield, and I had never been to the airfield before, and I had a plane coming in, and there was a lot of fog, really thick fog, and we got up to the field, and you couldn't see anything, and I could hear the plane going around and around. He didn't know where we were because it was all fogged in. So I took off my blouse and lit it on fire, and it put a plume of smoke that went straight up. And my pilot saw it and came right down and landed. And that was the first load we got off.
Right, so you went to Jamaica with the intention to bring a whole bunch of marijuana back?
Yes, not initially, but we couldn't. There was no marijuana in Florida where I was living at the time,
Mhm.
and everybody needed marijuana, and I've always been sort of an entrepreneur. Uh, so we brought a load back, yeah.
How big was the first load?
It was, I'm trying to think of the plane that we had. It was a twin engine. It was only a couple of 100 pounds,
Oh,
but
yeah,
that was
just a
a
couple 100
lot
pounds.
then.
Yeah,
That was a lot then, and it was excellent herb.
yeah,
The difference was that it
yeah,
was excellent herb, but, the difference was it was strange. It hadn't been manicured. So people, when
right.
they saw it, they thought, "This is not any good." It's not pretty, it's not bud, it's got leaves on it, and, I remember taking a branch of it, and I held it up like this in my hand, and I said, "What are you gonna do with this? It's so strong you can't smoke it." And it literally was that strong. It was a great herb. My connection over there. His name was Rock. He was a
Nice.
black man, and I loved him dearly.
Yeah,
And how
nice.
many loads
So
did
you
you
bring a couple 100 pounds back to South Florida, right?
Pardon
And
me?
then, I said, so your first trip, you bring a couple 100 pounds of marijuana back to South Florida, and then what? How do you get rid of it? And what's the plan at that point?
Well, my sister Nancy, I think she was the one that sold that initially.
Nancy gave it to clarify that, Nancy gave some of it, not all 200 pounds, maybe 50 pounds to me, and I sold it
Did
through
she
my
really,
network.
Bruce? Yeah, I wondered about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I got some of that first load through Nancy.
And it was, great herb. The problem was everybody loved it so much that you had to really watch it because it was better than having a load of diamonds, at that point, because nobody had really it was hard to get marijuana at that point.
Yeah.
And Nancy sold it. My father took the money back. I think I don't know whether he took the money back to Jamaica, that first load or not. Possibly, but if not, because you couldn't trust people with that kind of money to get it over to the people. I think my father took it back, the money, and paid off the Jamaicans. But that's how it started.
And when
Nice. And so they fronted the pot to you, and then you had
Yeah.
to owe
Oh,
them
yeah.
money and go back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They fronted the pot, and once we got the first load in, and everybody was desperate for marijuana over in the States, in Florida especially. And I
Yeah.
think Nancy sold it. I'm trying to think who she sold it for. Maybe it went to Michigan or someplace like that. Anyway, she sold
Bru
it. I went back over and went to the fields and started having the plates come in. I think it was I don't know whether it was a single engine plane that we first started, but it was only 90 miles anyway.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think that we got a bigger plane, and eventually we got a bigger plane then, we got a Queen Air. First, we had just an Aztec, which is a twin engine, and you could put, I don't know, 200 or 300 pounds with a pilot and a co-pilot, and I always had 2 pilots, and, you could take a couple of 300 pounds and then landed in Florida and landed in, lower part. I can't remember what it was called, but it was like in lower Miami. Outside of Miami, there were this whole area. They had streets and divisions like they were gonna build houses there, but they never did. But it was a perfect landing place. And we'd go over and the plane would come in. We'd have flashlights to tell the plane where we were. They'd land, we'd unload it, put it in a pickup truck, take it over to my house or my sister house, Nancy's, and it went from there.
how many loads did you actually bring in on a monthly basis or a weekly basis?
Weekly basis. It got to be where, like, we were doing at least 2 a week. And an Aztec, I think initially we were bringing in not a lot. Then I wanted to get a bigger plane. We got a Queen Air. And I think we did better with the smaller plane, even though we had to do more trips. It was just a better place. We got a
Right.
Queen Air, and we did a few loads with that. But that's how it began. And
And you
everybody
were never
wanted
nervous
it.
about never nervous about getting busted flying loads of marijuana back from Jamaica to Miami?
Nobody knew we were doing it. That was the key. Nobody knew we were doing it. I rented a house in, I'm trying to think of the place. Anyway, it was outside of Miami. And, rented a house, and we'd have a couple of times a week, they'd bring it over, unload it, and haul it into my house. I remember I'm trying to think of who was there. It was
Yeah, who was
somebody.
the crew that did the unload and the stacking and the selling? It was all your sisters?
No, my first pilot was Frank, Frank Corey. He's dead now. And he was
Rest in peace, Frank.
he was a friend of my sister, one of my younger sisters, and he was a great pilot. He just was a great pilot. And eventually, though, we got another pilot, and he was an airline pilot, a Delta airline pilot, Frank Mars. And we started flying in loads, couple a week at least. And
was it easy to convince a pilot to fly illegal pot from Jamaica to Miami?
well, it was only 90 miles. And they're
Right, but it
pilots,
w
you're just
right.
all they do is do the plane. They land, the Jamaicans load it up, they take off, they fly 90 miles, they land, it's unloaded into pickup trucks, and it's gone. And I think I paid him $50,000 a load, the pilot.
Wow. Wow, and what were you making from that load? Since the pilot's making 50 grand, what was the load selling for?
Well, quite a bit more, but, I found out with marijuana, everybody wants it. And so you had to be careful who you gave it to. You had to be guard it, have nobody know where it was. It was pretty tricky to keep it together, and people,
Right, so let's talk about that. How did you guard it, and how did you keep the secret?
nobody could know what you were doing. Nobody
Well, you
knew
had the people that were
where it
working with you,
was.
right?
Yeah. And only a very few people actually had any indication of the details of the pilot knew, I knew, I said my sister Nancy. I don't even think at that point, I'm trying to think if we had any men. I don't think we knew any men right then. It's just my sister Nancy and I, and we didn't have anybody but our pilots, and so nobody knew about it. And we had a house in Florida. I'm trying to think of the different places that we had. We could rent a house, They had houses because the seasonal people, and you could rent a nice house and nobody thought twice, and we just bring it in. It came in through the garage. I remember there was one guy, I can't remember his name, Bruce, you'd know it. It was one of my boyfriends eventually. And he had just come in and I had the load coming in. And so he had just gotten there. And here my guys, my pilot and his friend that had unloaded it, they're hauling in these bales of marijuana in front of him. And I'm not saying a word, and he's not even saying anything about it, and he's just sitting there. What was his name? Bruce, you'd know the guy I'm talking about.
I may have met him later. The main people I knew was Mike and Louie, and then, of course, Jeannie and Nancy. Those were the four from your family that I knew very, very well and worked with.
Well,
And how did you
they
make
had
that
been
connection,
doing
Bruce?
Mexican herb before that. And I hadn't really gotten a lot, I hadn't gotten involved with the Mexican. I only got involved basically when we started doing things out of Jamaica. And it was
And
really
Bruce,
good.
how did you make the connection to Judy's sisters?
Well, back then, you had to understand the environment. If you were an entrepreneur, the business of choice was marijuana buying and selling. So Mike and Louie and Nancy, when I would get a load, I would go to them, and they would sell some of my Colombian, or sometimes I got Jamaican, or sometimes even Mexican back in those early days. They were the Mexican bricks, little bricks. And so they were just part of the group that we all sold to. Back then, there was no conspiracy law, so you couldn't say he gave me pot and I sold it, and that person could go to jail, right? It was you had to catch it red-handed. So we worked with a lot of people, and they were just part of the network, and they were really cool people. Nancy was beautiful, all of her Judy's sisters, including her, were all beautiful. And Mike
At that point.
and Mike and Louie were really cool guys. They were down to earth, nice guys. And I just was working with them. So whether I was giving them loads, like Craig said in his podcast, episode number 5, when he went back from California to Florida, he brought 2,500 pounds up to Mike and Louie and Jeannie and at their house. So it wasn't they were just only giving us the Jamaican. We were giving them whatever we had, and they were giving us whatever they had. A lot of that was Judy's. I never took her whole load, just a part of her load. And then the
What was I
latest
bringing in, about 1,000 pounds then, or not quite?
No, I would take about 500 each time from Mike and Louie. And the last time, I think there was about 2,000 pounds out when I moved to California in '78. That was the last time I saw Mike and Louie before I ran my big empire out there. And they had one of your loads at Jamaican that they had brought out to California, and they were staying at the Hyatt Regency in Fisherman's Wharf. And I went up there. I sold about half of that load, and the other half they sold, through their own connections. And then I started doing my smuggling and lost touch pretty much for a long time with Nancy, Mike, and Louie, and Jeannie, and then, like I said earlier, the next time I saw Judy, or when I actually met her in person, was in federal prison when we were both in there for smuggling. But that's
I remember
jumping over.
walking around, Bruce, I remember walking around the field out there, and I was walking with Lana. She was my roommate, and I really didn't know anything about her. And I said, "What are you in here for?" And she says, "I'm a spy." And she says, "What are you in here?" I says, "I'm a smuggler." Yeah, she was I miss Lon. I miss Lon.
Yeah, so do I. So, Judy, tell us in the book. Again, this is the book that people can buy, and it's a great reading. I'm in a small
Gosh, I haven't seen
chapter.
that in a long time.
So, but tell us how you got arrested and escaped and became why you were David Michael's most
Yeah, but
wanted.
before we do that, let's talk more about the business side of things. So you're going to Jamaica a couple of times a week, and you're bringing in, at this point, thousands of pounds. And how do you turn that into a business that you're not afraid to operate in?
Well, nobody was doing it. Nobody knew about that, and nobody knew we were doing it. That was the primary thing. You didn't know. Nobody knew where your house was, nobody knew when you were bringing it in. Only the pilot, the people that caught it, like the plane would come in, land, and they landed outside in Miami. There was a whole, I can't remember, huge amount of acres where they had looked like it was meant to be a housing district. It was all paved roads and lots and everything, but no houses. Nobody lived there. And so we just had a pickup truck, put it in the pickup truck, drove to my house in Miami or wherever it was in that area, and bring it in and put it in the bedroom.
What did you
And
do
then-
with
And
all
no
the money?
fear of landing a plane in the middle of an abandoned neighborhood.
Well,
No
there was
fear
nobody
of the cops
there.
showing up.
I wonder if
Well,
there's anybody there now. I'm sure there is. But it used to be, it looked like it looked just like a neighborhood, but no houses. All the
right.
streets and everything lined up, but there were no houses. And that was
Got it.
outside of Miami,
All right, let's talk about the money. What kind of money are you making, in the early days, and how did that grow over time?
I'm trying to think of what we sold it for initially. And we sold different, I would always they'd always send some special stuff in market for me because it was the nicer stuff. It was the prettier stuff. And I think, we didn't sell it for a lot, but we sold it very quickly because nobody had it.
Right.
Nancy was the one that sold most of my herb for me. She was the one that had the connections to sell it. We went
Right.
to Michigan, went to Colorado. I'm trying to think if we did much in California. I don't think we did. Michigan,
Right. And what kind of money were you making?
$3,600 a pound.
Got it. And you'd bring in hundreds at a time. So a lot of cash flying through.
Yeah.
What do you do with all the cash?
Well, my father took it back to pay the Jamaicans because I couldn't trust anybody but my father. And Daddy
Nice. You keep smuggling in the family where it belongs, right?
Yeah. And Daddy would take the money back, and initially, it went pretty well because nobody was looking for us, and we were careful. Nobody knew what we were doing. We would rent a house. We would be there, you can get a nice house for $2,000 furnished, everything, lights on and everything. We'd live there for maybe a couple of months, then we get another place. And you just never, only the people that were directly involved knew where you were. Because
Right.
you had to be careful because everybody wanted it. If people knew
Sure.
that you had that kind of herb, they'd steal it. In fact, I lost a lot of it through theft.
Right.
People that, would
Right.
take it
So
and
your
not
dad was
pay for
flying
it.
the money back to the Jamaicans, but he wasn't flying all of the money, just the money that you owed to the Jamaicans, right? For
Right.
for the next time. And what were you doing with all that money?
I don't know, just keeping it. I didn't make all that much. I'd make maybe $10,000, $15,000 off a load, maybe a little bit more, 30
Mhm.
in the beginning. That's all
Right.
you made, and, once you have enough for whatever you need, you can pay you can buy a car. I bought a nice car, I remember a nice little green Cadillac Seville, used,
Nice.
it was not a brand new one. Nancy got a red one, I got a green one, and, uh and Daddy would take the money back to the Jamaicans,
And you
and my
said you bought
pilot
more
would stay.
planes? You bought more planes.
Well, we used, twin, twin air Aztecs. I'm just remembering even the planes that we used. Initially, we had twin engine Aztec, and so there was, and then we went to Queen Air, and a Queen Air could hold maybe, over 1,000 pounds, and we just grew from that. And everybody was happy, there was nobody that knew what we were doing, which was the most important thing, and, there was a great market for it.
Yeah, talk about the growth of the organization and how you kept getting bigger and badder, stronger and faster.
Well, we didn't try to get bigger or better, it just happened. Nobody had any decent herb, and we had the best.
And did that turn into thousands of pounds and then hundreds of thousands of pounds?
Well, I probably in an Aztec, you could only I'm trying to think about how many pounds we could actually and always I had 2 pilots, so you could only take maybe a 3 or 400 pounds at a time in an Aztec because it's big, it's not a small thing. I'm trying to think of how many pounds we brought in the Aztecs. Maybe 500 at the most,
Right.
500
So
pounds.
you just did so you just did more trips and more trips and more trips, and then you got a bigger plane?
We used the Aztec for a long time, and then I got a Queen Air, and you could take a 1,500, 2,000 pounds in a Queen Air.
Got it. And you were feeding your organization or your distribution channel, and your distribution channel was really your sisters.
My sister Nancy primarily, and
Yeah.
Louis, her husband. And then I'm trying to think if I had a boyfriend at that time. I think I did, because I remember being in a place in South Florida, and I was expecting a load, and my guy came in, and I had this new guy that he didn't really know what I was doing or anything. I'm trying to think of his name. I should know it real easily. Uh, and he said, his name was Frank Corey, he was my pilot. He was a friend of my younger sister's, Blue, and he came in and he says, delivery, and this guy looked over at me, and I didn't say any word what he was delivering or anything, and then he just started bringing it in. I had just gone to the garage, flipped the switch, and opened it, and he drives the truck in and starts unloading it. It was interesting, and it started from there, and we started bringing in loads of marijuana, uh, about 2 a week, and then we went to the Queen Air, and we could take maybe 1,200 or 1,500 pounds in a Queen Air, as opposed to maybe 2 or 3 or 4 in a Aztec, because
And at this
both.
point where at this point, you're neck deep into bringing loads in on a regular basis.
Mhm.
No fear from getting busted?
Never even crossed my mind.
Hmm.
Of course, we didn't advertise it. We
No, of
rented
course not. Of
houses,
course not.
very easy to rent a house in Miami or in that area, uh, you know, pay a couple of $1,000, furnished house, lights are on, and they'd go and pick it up. I knew that when they were coming, they'd call me, or I'd know when they were coming. Flip the garage open, they drive it in, they're in a pickup truck. They bring it in, put it in the bedroom, and then it
And did
got
you maintain
distributed from there.
your sewing shop? Did you
Pardon me?
maintain your sewing shop as a cover,
No,
or, you
no,
just let that go away?
At that time, I'm trying to think, did I have a sewing shop? I might not have had a sewing shop at that time. I
And
don't
your
think I
husband, the
did.
bank manager, did he, help you
No,
launder any of
now
that
by
money,
that
or there
time, I
just
had
wasn't enough?
already no, by the time I started smuggling, I had left my husband. I
Wow.
left him when he was a bank manager in, Parker, Arizona, and I divorced him. He was not a
Got
good
it.
man. He pulled my hair and threw me down on the bed and wouldn't let me
Oh,
get
geez.
away.
Hmm.
And finally, I just said, "You can't keep me, if I wanna go." And I'd sort of run to one door, I had a big bedroom, 30 by 30, and I'd run to one door to get away, and he'd grab me and push me down on the bed, and it was sort of like a joke after a while, how often can you do that? You can't really keep somebody trapped and in keep them from going away if they wanna get away unless you wanna tie them up, and he didn't wanna tie me up, I guess. He might have tried if he thought it would work. No, mm-mm.
Right, right. So, Bruce, all this time that you are buying or just getting your weed from Judy's sisters, right? And are you like, "Wow, this is great weed, and it's really hard to keep on the shelf?"
Well, it was going both ways. I was buying it from them when they had their loads in, which was weekly, pretty much, and I was
Do you
also.
remember what you were selling? We were selling it for, Bruce?
No, it wasn't 3,600, like, that's, homegrown later in California. That was, like, 175, because Colombian was, like, 250, and Jamaican was not quite as expensive as Jamaican, but you had lamb's breath, so lamb's breath was a whole different
Oh, lamb's
animal.
bread was a whole different thing, yeah.
That's like connoisseur, homegrown, so that who knows what that would sell for, it could have been as high as $4,000 a pound. So the 3,600 number was probably accurate, because that's like what Maui Wowie and Gainesville Green back in those days, those are very
God, I just
expensive.
remembered Gainesville Green.
Right, remember that? So it
I
was
just
it was
remember
back
that.
and forth, we sold them Colombian, and they didn't when you're doing that, they didn't just sell Judy's Jamaican loads. They were brokering other loads, they were offloading. Did you guys ever bring offload stuff of Colombian freighters, or do an offload, or have speedboats and get part of that scene that was also going on? I know Mike and Louie were just doing everything, selling loads to us, we were selling loads to them, um, and it was just a heyday, I mean, a load of hash would come in once in a while from some guy. There's a whole different, army of people that were bringing hash in, and that would come in once in a blue moon, you know? Um, so it was back and
Well,
forth. We all worked together back
what
then.
well, yeah, the hash has to be processed, and you don't get as much hash as you have in marijuana, but it's concentrated, so it's definitely more powerful.
Yeah, there was, for us, the hash was more personal stash. People would buy it, they buy 10 pounds, they sell 9, keep 1. Just like it's interesting listening to Judy's story because the emphasis, the drive for smuggling marijuana started with self-medication, getting your medication for yourself. And
Right.
all the smugglers seem to have started the same, except for very rare occasions. You know, buy a pound, sell a bunch of ounces, and have a couple ounces left for yourself. Buy an ounce, sell a bunch of nickel bags, and have a little bit left over for yourself. Buy a nickel bag, sell a bunch of joints for $1 each, like Craig talked about, and have a couple joints left over for yourself. The wasn't the money or the business end of it. It was the desire to have the marijuana. That was our drug of choice. It was like,
Michael and Louie, did you work with Michael and Louie too, didn't you?
a lot with Michael. I love those guys. They were great guys, and that was Nancy's husband, was Louis, who just passed away. We almost had him on a
Yeah.
podcast, but he passed away like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Been
Yeah.
a little bit longer than that. It's funny because I had just called him for the first time in years, and I called Louie, and we talked and everything, and it was good. He was having problems then with his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how long is this going on, Judy? You're bringing in loads week after week after week after week. You're renting houses all over
Yeah, we
South
started doing
Florida.
about 2 loads a week, and by that time, I think we had gotten the Queen Air, so we were bringing home instead of, the amount that you could put into a Aztec, which was not bad, I can't remember exactly what it was, but the Queen Air, you could put 1,000 pounds or 1,500 pounds in it, and,
Right. And how long is this going on for?
months, part of years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how did you end up getting busted and becoming on the FBI's 15th most wanted list? I mean,
Oh,
you were obviously way bigger than we're
I'll
talking
tell
about.
you how. I had one of my boyfriends. In fact, I'm trying to even remember his name. I think he got arrested in Colorado and flipped, turned me in. And I was
Isn't
living
that how most
I
people
had
get busted?
a beautiful old it was built in 1850s in, White Springs, Florida, two-storied house, beautiful, 16 rooms, 5 fireplaces, and I remember I had just had a baby, and they rang my doorbell, and I went to the door, and I saw that they were the police, and I remember I had a little rolling tray, and I went and threw the stuff in the fireplace and then let them in, and they arrested me, yeah. And then they had arrested my father, and they had arrested my sister, Nancy.
And they did that all on your ex-boyfriend who rolled over on you.
Yeah.
And were you
I
busted with
think,
a certain
I'm trying to
amount?
think, I hope I don't blame him for that, but I think I think he got pulled over, he had a couple of 100 pounds in Colorado, and then I think he rolled, yeah. Bad
And
man.
isn't that how most smugglers or dealers get busted? Somebody just
Of course,
get
and it's
some
usually
low-level
somebody that's
person?
jealous and has worked in their organization and turns them in. Either they get busted or they get some kind of a problem or just do it for the hell of it, I don't know.
Well, we're gonna stop right there because we are running out of time, but we definitely wanna hear, the story of how Judy, the Golden Dragon Lady, was captured, and then she broke out of jail, and then recaptured, and then connected with, of course, Bruce Perlowin, the King of Pot, in Pleasanton, California. So, Judy, thanks for joining us. I look forward to continuing the conversation next week. Bruce, as always, a lot of fun talking about old days of smuggling. I'm Todd Denkin. He's Bruce Perlowin. She is the Golden Dragon Lady. And we'll see you next time.